Hello there and welcome once again to the Mayor's Magazine. I'm Mick Cornett and this is our program for July 2017. Thanks for joining us. In this first segment, we're going to talk to Gary Brooks. Now, Gary, as you may know, is working on a huge development downtown. He's taken on the First National Center, and his intent is to turn that into its return to its glory, but in some ways bigger and better than it was ever built to be originally. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, remind me of all the different components of this. There's going to be a hotel component, an apartment component.
145-room hotel, 200 apartments, parking garage to accommodate the hotel and the residents, about 670 spaces, and about 30,000 foot of retail all along Park Avenue.
Yeah. Any one of those would be a giant project, but when you combine them all together, I bet you don't get a lot of sleep at night.
We will in 3 years.
Tell me about taking a task like that on. What's like the first step when a guy of your stature decides he wants to take on this the giant of all rehabilitation projects in Oklahoma City? Where do you start?
You wake yourself up first.
Yeah.
Then First National can be overwhelming. And so you try not to get too focused on the big picture. You just take it a step at a time. And the first thing you do is put your team together. You know, I can't pull something like this off without 147 people that I go out, handpick, and found. And so that's the first thing we did. We just built the right team and started momentum, and we're 18 months into the due diligence and the acquisitions. We bought it in January, so we're about 5 months into the easy construction. The hard stuff begins here in about 30 days.
I'm going to guess more than half the people in Oklahoma City have never been in the First National, certainly not up in the tower part. What have they missed? What's in there that this generation is going to discover for the first time?
Well, everyone knows about the Great Hall. And occasionally I'll tour someone who's never been in, and I like to see their expression the first time they look up and see the hall. The biggest surprise is the vault. Even people that may have officed in that building for 25 years have never been in the vault. And the vault seems to be the one thing when people see it, that it's so unique, it's something they've never seen before. And we begin to talk about the restaurant down there and the experiences it will create. So I think the vault will be the thing that people are going to want to come see after the Great Hall, of course.
Right. And what about the very top floors? What do you have in mind
We'll have a bar, restaurant on the top floors. There'll be a club reserved for residents and hotel guests on the 32nd floor. And a few people may have access to the beacon, climbing to the very top. There is a ladder that takes you all the way up to the top of the beacon. So.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
I remember seeing a barber shop in there one time.
The barber shop's on the 14th floor, which is going to be a resident amenity floor. And I had enough people tell me that there's some stories that came out of that barber shop were pretty impressive. Mr. Gaylord apparently used to have a standing appointment every 3:30 on Friday. And the stories I began to hear got my attention. There's 3 old barber chairs in there that are spectacular. So we're going to recreate that barber shop with those 3 chairs exactly in its form it's in now, move it to the first floor concourse and reopen it as an active barber shop.
Wow. All right, so the lobby for the hotel will be on what floor?
Well, the hotel guests will enter, of course, on the west side, the lobby there. But they'll quickly work their way up through either a concierge or some type of valet to the second level, which will be the Great Hall. The Great Hall is programmed in a number of ways. It's a big public space. We want to recreate that for a great public space. It's your hotel lobby if you're a hotel guest. We'll have a restaurant there. We'll have a bar there. We'll create a museum on the northwest corner of the Great Hall.
And what's been the reaction from your contemporaries, other people in the development community that through the years have thought about this or looked at it, and they see you taking it on and heading? What's their reaction to it?
Well, I went to a few of them, people that I trusted and respected, and they all said, "Don't do it. You know, why would you take it on? You know,
Right.
We got a lot of good projects and things are going well, so why take it on?" Once they realized that I was serious, then they all began very supportive. I've had incredible support from your staff, from just the general population. We're having a big open house coming up this week, and people want to get in and see the building. So once they realized I was serious, they got behind me pretty well.
You know, when you start looking at what this generation has been able to, kind of turn around, you can look at Bricktown and those old abandoned warehouse districts and see how they've been transformed. There's the Colcord Hotel, which was turned around, about 10 years ago. And then, of course, there's the Skirvin Hotel, which at the time seemed like, the most important thing on our landscape. But then there was the First National, which, seemed to have not just, the puzzle of what to do with it, but also some intricate problems like parking and asbestos and other things that just come with with an 80-year-old building. So I assume that's some of the hurdles that the others had seen and just said, there's got to be another project for me.
The journey seemed too hard for most people. In fact, one of my close developer friends said, Brooks, just don't get emotional about it. And that's the general reaction. As a developer, you don't ever want to let your emotions. And I told him, I said, emotion's the only thing that will carry me through at times. So if you don't get emotional about it, you won't ever want to take on the challenge.
Well, what can people at home do if they're just kind of anxious to see it or want to root you on? What should they do?
Well, I try to update people on my Twitter account at Gary D. Brooks. Just people started asking me questions, send me pictures, and so I was able to start, kind of keeping people up to date with that. I think there'll be enough things happen over the next 3 years that we want to try to make this Oklahoma City's building, and we want people to feel engaged. We'll be posting on my Twitter account pretty quick a website that people can go to because we want them to share their stories.
Right.
Like almost everyone you take in there has a story. Their mom worked there, their dad worked there, they worked there. And so we want to collect as many of those stories as we can from people in Oklahoma City about the building and somehow weave that into the fabric of the redevelopment.
All right. Gary, thanks for taking this on. We look forward to continued updates. So send your stories into Gary Brooks. Tell him about memories that you have of the First National Building and cheer him on as he attempts to bring that building back to its former glory. We'll have more on the Mayor's Magazine right after this.
Coach Switzer here to help you put the blitz on mosquito-borne diseases. This is something my family knows a lot about. My son Doug got West Nile virus, and it's not easy to beat. Here's my mosquito defense playbook. Drain standing water, protect your skin with DEET repellent, and wear long clothes when outside. Make sure your window screens are in good shape. Join the team. Report stagnant water to Oklahoma City and City County Health.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Magazine. Mick Cornett with Kim Garrett and Trish Everest. Welcome back. We're here to talk about the Palomar and the early months of your adventure in this area. Who wants to start off and give us an update? All right. Kim, how long has it been open?
We opened February 2nd, and I'm excited to say that we've already got 17 partners on site that are very active. We've got over 70 individuals representing those agencies on site. And within the first 4 months, we've seen over 1,800 clients.
Yeah, and so it's a family justice center. Define that for people.
Sure. So a family justice center is a co-location and coordination of services. So cops, prosecutors, advocates, therapists, social workers, all working together in one location to provide wraparound services for families, victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, domestic violence is such a tough issue because a lot of times women don't know where to start. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what the repercussions are going to be from calling the police or taking the next step, especially when there are kids involved. And Trish, I know this is one area that you've really found close to your heart.
I sure have. And just, Mayor, one of the things that's wonderful is of those almost 1,800 now people, it's a complete demographic of our city. So we've had some men, we've had some women, it really matches our citizenship, which is pretty impressive. So when they come in, you can come in for a protective order, and the court's clerks have even come down if someone has children, whether it's a grandparent or a mom or a guardian, and they can come in, and Rainbow Fleet has provided a playroom where the children are safe. And then once they're feeling comfortable, so even whether they come in for a protective order or some civil advice with legal aid, then in that real time, they're not as intimidated to maybe talk to a police officer, to talk to a detective, and have the various services coming together. As a side, each of these different entities that are now working together in real time. So what would take 7 weeks to coordinate someone to meet with a civil attorney, a detective, therapist, and those three never ever connecting the dots. We're Department of Human Services, we have the children, and we have elder abuse care in there. For all of them, they are meeting now within 7 minutes, and they can meet with that client, and they can continue the conversation. And the job satisfaction, each one has validated each other's profession, because now they understand more of what, it's not just a detective has filed a report and hands off a paper. They are now working together, and they come up with better ways to wrap around that individual in indirect services. So the change not only in job satisfaction and in efficiency of service, it is really exciting to see that in only 3 or 4 months, the change with the employees and with the clients coming through.
Kim, who are the most important partner agencies that can help you be successful?
Well, I think they all have something unique and special that they can bring to the table. I know some of the most highly utilized services are the YWCA, their advocacy programming, and also legal aid with civil legal attorneys. They are probably the most sought after resources. Also OCPD, detectives are used quite a bit. But everybody's got unique skills that they bring to the table, and really what's exciting is Chief City calls this a game changer for Oklahoma City, and it is. We're really changing the framework of how professionals respond to families, and I really do believe that in 10, 20 years you're going to see a difference in generational violence, breaking cycles of violence, and social change in our community.
I think people can sense the passion that you two have, but you also bring in professional experience, each of you. Could you talk about your background and what drove you to this? Kim, you first, and then
Sure.
Tricia, you.
I'm a licensed master social worker. I'm a nationally certified advocate. I've worked in the field for 15 years. I started victim services at Oklahoma City Police Department. That's what made me realize we've got great services, but what we do is hand brochures to people when they're hurting and they're in crisis, and we expect them to go from agency to agency, and they give up and they get overwhelmed, understandably. And so that was why we did the coordinated response. And so it's just my passion. Like, I love working with families and seeing this collaboration. It's amazing.
It's so important. And Tricia, you saw it from which angle?
I saw it from a number of angles, but when I was in college, I wrote a senior thesis on if victims of domestic violence were being as abused when they entered the system. So it was amazing that 25 some odd years later, some of the same problems, though that was in a different state, still existed. When I was in college, law school, I specialized in child abuse and neglect and worked a lot with the juvenile center, and realized that a lot of those things hadn't changed either. And in between, as you know, I've been very blessed to serve on a number of different organizations and serve on private foundations as well. And so watching how different groups work together, that I think that the timing was right, and I'm very, very proud to see the stepping stones that have led me, all those experiences, to be here.
How can people help? What can people do that just want to be a part of this?
Absolutely. We have volunteer opportunities, internships. They can get on our website, which is www.palomarokc.org. They can phone us at 552-1010 and learn about different opportunities. Follow us on social media. We're always talking about ways that people can get involved with doing different drives, bringing in food for survivors, things like that. And so there's a lot of different ways people can get involved.
All right, Kim,
Mayor,
Garrett,
I
Tricia.
would like to add too that a lot of the ways people can get involved is just by talking about it. People don't necessarily know that they're in a crisis or that their life could be any different, but the more I notice that we've talked about it, and we provide lots of tours, that those tours have spun off and people have brought in their employees, they've brought in their neighbors, they've brought in their friends, they've seen, like when we did the show before, and they remember it and they bring in their children. So probably one of the most important ways for us to get prevention is just that word of mouth, to continually know it's okay to go somewhere, even if you don't think you need it. And we'll provide those wraparound services and continue on.
All right. Well, if you feel like you're a victim or you have a friend who might be, it's a wonderful organization to pick up the phone and call and get some information on how they might be able to help you or your friend. Thanks to both of you, and we'll be right back with another segment right after this.
At Embark, we're not just stops on a map or collection of random people. We are a community connected.
Since I usually don't get off till around 11, having this late night route is really a stress reliever for me.
Our choices on where to live, work, learn, meet, and play grow with the connections we create. And with strong connections come economic opportunities and vibrant communities. Where public transit goes, community grows. Plan your journey at embarkok.com.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Magazine. In this segment, I'm going to recommend a book to you. It's called Classic Restaurants in Oklahoma City, and Dave Cathey is here, the author of the book. Dave, welcome to the Mayor's Magazine.
Mayor,
this must have been a lot of fun to research and do.
It was.
Give us some takeaways from just being able to research through the archives and find out information about these classic places.
First takeaway is don't tell your publisher you can do a 2-year job in 6 months.
Okay. Give yourself some time. Under promise, over deliver.
That's exactly right. But now, I tell you what I really learned is people in the restaurant industry in this city are a huge part of the foundation of what it is today and what it's become, and they're among the hardest working people that you can imagine. I mean, these are folks that in a lot of cases were just looking for something to do, some way to survive, and found a system of their own that they could create and make it work for decades in many cases.
I'm looking at the front here, and there's a picture of Beverly's and the Hickory House and Holly's Drive-In, and you know, there's that old story about the Cattleman's Cafe changing hands on the roll of a dice.
Yes.
Did that really happen?
Yes, it did. December, I believe it was Christmas Eve, 1945, and Hank Fry was the owner, and he was a well-known gambler. And the Cattleman's Cafe at that time, actually from its beginning, was known as a house of gambling more than anything else. And Hank was down on his luck, and he was facing down Gene Wade and his father, and bet the house against a hard six. And no one knows exactly who rolled the dice that night. Depends on who you ask, but it was one of the two Wades, and they got it. And that is a true story.
And they handed over the keys, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and the guy, Hank Fry had gotten it under similar circumstances.
I see.
So
makes sense.
That's right.
Yeah, and how many of these classic restaurants are still with us?
Unfortunately, the book came out middle of last year, late last year, and many of them closed just last year. You know, we had the Boulevard closed. We had
Coach House.
The Coach House, yeah. There's so many. The last of our drive-ins closed. The original drive-ins closed. But there's still a handful. You know, Jamil's is still around. Cattleman's, of course, is still around. There's plenty of old-time places to check out. You know, for those that are interested. And you know, that's something too. I've talked to some of the people who own some of those places, and we've got some events in mind in the next year to bring back some of those old foods in an event atmosphere. Well,
one thing that makes your book timely, I think, is we're kind of in a restaurant building boom now.
For sure. You know, the beginning of this year we saw a little bit of a slowdown, but here in the last month it's just been as fast as ever. The bust of the early 80s really hurt local restaurants.
We lose a bunch in that era.
Oh yeah. Well, there was so much money. And as you learn when you cover restaurants for very long, there's a lot of cash that's moving hands. And so that just helps that industry. I mean, they built up and they got really big really fast, and then they collapsed really fast. And that also opened us up to a lot of chain restaurants moving in at that time. So in the mid to late 80s and in the early 90s, we were sort of under siege from chain only. But in the 90s, we had a little bit we actually had a really nice renaissance.
Yeah. If we were in Oklahoma City, say back in the 20s or 30s, where mightn't we have eaten?
Probably Bishop's would have been one of the first choices. It was originally out of Tulsa, but they ended up lasting here in Oklahoma City longer than the original did in Tulsa. And it was pancakes, but it also had sort of a back room, you know, for something a little nicer. They all had those back then. That would have definitely been one of them. But you probably would have eaten in a cafeteria, most like Anna Mott's.
Yeah. Tell me about researching the book. How do you go about it? Where'd you find the information? Through the Oklahoman's archives?
That's a big part of it. Yeah, and obviously, is my job as a food editor for the Oklahoman. I heard a lot of these stories.
I see.
You know, during interviews, even done a few of these stories, or at least talked to people who knew. So I had a lot of good sources still. But yeah, the archives. I interviewed a lot of folks from around the city. I kind of put out the word that I was working on it, and had people reach out to me and talk to some of the original owners on some of these things, or at least family. So It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Any unique menu items that are no longer with us? Do you remember?
Many.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we even talk about it in the book, but the Dinko Darlin down in Norman,
Yeah,
of course.
in college, I had a Dinko
sure,
Darlin.
Sure.
I remember a piece of rice floating in the grease all the way down the plate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you know, past the enchilada.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
The table wasn't very level too, did it?
But yeah, you can still get a Big Bev burger at Beverly's, and you can still get the chicken in the rough. So those things are still with us.
Yeah.
But chocolate icebox pie from the patio, you probably can't get anymore. And then all the great pies from all the different cafeterias that we had. That's probably the thing I miss the most when the Boulevard closes. All that great pie.
What breakfast places were famous?
You know, waffles were really the first big thing in restaurants in Oklahoma. That's the thing I found in my research. Bishop's was actually a chain that started in Tulsa and reached all the way into New Mexico. And the one here just happened to get bigger and stronger than a lot of them. And Beverly's was originally Osborne's Waffle Shop, a tiny little place where kind of over behind the call court, where the call court is right now. And he actually opened 7 more within about 6 years before the Depression hit. And that really sunk him, and he got lucky with the idea for the chicken in the rough. Right around the time that he was closing all his restaurants, he had one left, and that one converted into First Beverly's.
All right. Dave, Cathey, thanks for coming on the Mayor's Magazine. The book is Classic Restaurants of Oklahoma City. Tell us how we can get one.
Oh, local bookstores have them. There's actually a hardback version you can get now down at any of your local bookstores. Should be able to get it.
Any of the locally owned bookstores, you can pick this up. I recommend it. It's a great trip down memory lane. We'll have more on the Mayor's Magazine after this.
Convenient. Con-free-niet. It's the harmonious marriage of free and convenient. And it's the perfect word to describe the mobile app from Oklahoma City Utilities Customer Service Division. Download it free today and manage your OKC utility account on the go. You can check your bill on your smartphone or device and pay your bill on the run, anywhere, anytime. Free app, convenient access. It doesn't get more convenient than that. Download the OKC Utilities app today. The convenient way to manage your Oklahoma City utility account.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Magazine. In this segment, we're going to learn about an incredible project that was the brainchild of Terry Neese, and it's called IEEW, the International Economic Empowerment of Women. And Terry, you saw a need and sought to fill it.
I did. I got a call from the White House and the Education Department and the State Department to help women entrepreneurs in Afghanistan. And that has blossomed into Africa now, Rwanda, and we have been educating women on the ground in Afghanistan and Rwanda and bringing them here to the United States for additional education, mentoring, and training for 11 years.
Wow. Now, are you creating entrepreneurs? Is that the idea?
Yes. Many of them have their own business, and many of them have college degrees. However, just because you have a college degree doesn't mean you know how to run a business. So we are really teaching them about entrepreneurship, building a business plan, making sure your financial statements are ready for a banker to look at, marketing ideas, all of those things, and then matching them with American Oklahoma women business owners to work with them and live with them here in July. The women are actually here in our city in July to live and work with Oklahoma women entrepreneurs.
And Tony, with the Bank of America, what role do you all play in this collaboration?
Well, Bank of America's focus right now is responsible growth, and that can be a number of different facets. And when we learned about the work that the Institute for Economic Empowerment of Women was, what their focus was, what Terry and the success rate that the group was having, we felt like that would be a good place to support and to invest some dollars, and not only financial support, but also to garner some volunteers and some other types of resources that we feel like will benefit them.
Terry, do you have any individual anecdotes about success stories?
We have a woman from Afghanistan who was actually in our first class in 2007 who had 24 employees who sat cross-legged on the floor, hand sewing soccer balls. I wish I'd have brought that for a visual today. And today, 11 years later, 10 years later, She has almost 400 employees.
Oh my.
She's exporting soccer balls to Germany, and she is just a firecracker. She is on fire doing tremendous work in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And we have clothing designers in Rwanda. It's actually pronounced Rwanda, not Rwanda.
Rwanda. Okay.
And she was on Forbes magazine cover and the covers of several magazines as Entrepreneur of the Year. Just incredible stories. And recently, the president of Afghanistan has sanctioned a women's chamber of commerce, and our leader is running that chamber.
Yeah. Tony, I know with the increased oversight of banks, these can't be typical conventional loans. How do you work with the entities involved to make this happen?
Well, our role is actually not for financing some of these entrepreneurs. There's some other organizations that we work with. Tori Birch, she focuses on more domestic opportunities to finance women entrepreneurs. But what we do is to do part of the education and to also provide, as I mentioned, human resources to help out. I think what's incredible about IEW is the stats for small business owners in the United States is 90% of them fail in the first 5 years. The Institute for the Economic Empowerment of Women have 80% of their businesses still operating.
Wow. And
so you kind of, that's a reciprocal number, and it proves the quality of the program, it proves the quality of the applicants and how well they're trained.
We've graduated over 600 women. They've created almost 13,000 jobs. And like Tony said, 80% are still in business at the end of 10 years. That's an incredible percentage.
Are others looking at the success and trying to duplicate this in other
countries?
Yeah?
They are. But I think our key to success is the mentorship. We e-mentor via email and Skype and WhatsApp, all kinds of social media ways to talk to each other. And the friendships just stick for years and years and years. There's not a mentor for a year. They're a mentor for years.
I see.
Whether it's e-mentoring or when the women come here, they actually live and work with a woman entrepreneur who owns a like industry to theirs.
I see.
Well, and the first time we met and I learned as much as I did about IEW, one of the guests that you had was a male that owned a printing company, I think, and so he was a mentor to one of these ladies. So it doesn't necessarily have to be female.
That's right. Impressions Printing mentored Freshta from Afghanistan, and she was the only woman-owned printing company in the entire country of Afghanistan.
Are there language barriers you have to overcome?
They're not really. I mean, they speak pretty good English. Obviously, it's their second language.
Right.
But they're really pretty sharp with their English.
Bright people.
They are.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all of this. It's a fabulous project to take on, and the success I think would be expected seeing the two of you and knowing of your reputations the way I do. But thanks for doing this. A lot of lives have been changed.
Yeah.
You got an event coming up?
Got an event coming up July 18, and the women will be in town. So if people want to come out and learn the culture of Afghanistan and Rwanda and meet these women from those countries who are here getting more education and mentorship, we have Her Art Fashion Extravaganza, I call it. OSU Design and Merchandising, the College of OSU Design and Merchandising are actually designing the clothes that will be worn that night. And I understand they're really going to do some exciting things like maybe putting lights on some of the clothes. And I mean, they're really coming up with some creative things.
That's great.
And it's at the 21C Museum.
Okay. So a good excuse to come down to the 21C if you've not seen it since it's opened a year ago, and help out and witness a truly entrepreneurial effort headlined by Terry Neese. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. Very important. And Tony, appreciate your sponsorship of such a worthwhile organization.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this month's show. Thank you for joining us on the Mayor's Magazine.